The evening rush at Golden Cup Diner was finally winding down. The usual mix of coffee-stained mugs and half-empty plates cluttered the worn tables, telling stories of another busy day. Behind the counter, a young waitress wiped down the surface for what felt like the 100th time that day, her feet aching from the double shift she just worked. Rain tapped gently against the large windows, creating a peaceful rhythm that contrasted with the chaos of the day. She hummed softly to herself, a habit she developed over the 3 years of working at this downtown diner. The tune was something she'd been working on in her head during the quiet moments between serving customers. Her notepad, stuffed in her apron pocket, was filled with more than just food orders. Between the scribbled 2 eggs over easy and chocolate shake, no whip, there were fragments of lyrics, little pieces of dreams she jotted down while rushing between tables. Some were inspired by the stories her regular customers shared, others by her own journey of trying to make it in the big city. The kitchen radio played softly in the background, mostly static and late-night advertisements, but she preferred her own melodies anyway. As she moved through the empty diner, straightening chairs and refilling salt shakers, her humming grew into quiet singing. Her voice carried the weight of the day's experiences. The kind elderly couple who left her an extra-large tip, knowing she was saving up for something special. The businessman who barely looked up from his phone. The young family whose little girl had drawn her a picture on a napkin. In these quiet moments after closing, when the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead and the coffee maker had finally stopped dripping, the diner became her concert hall. Each table was an audience member, each booth a loyal fan. She didn't need fancy equipment or a backing track. The clink of plates she stacked provided the percussion, and the hum of the refrigerator became her baseline. Her coworkers had long since noticed her talent. The cook would often pause his cleanup routine just to listen, and the dishwasher had started timing his breaks with her end-of-shift cleaning, knowing that's when she felt most comfortable letting her voice soar. They'd been encouraging her to perform at open mic nights, but she always laughed it off. After all, dreams of music stardom didn't pay the bills or help support her family back home. Tonight's song was different, though. It wasn't just random humming or covering popular radio hits. The lyrics spoke of small-town dreams in a big city, of serving coffee while holding on to hope, of seeing extraordinary moments in ordinary days. She'd been piecing it together for weeks now, writing lines on receipt papers and napkins whenever inspiration struck. The vacuum cleaner's drone provided an unexpected harmony as she moved between tables, her voice growing stronger with each verse. She sang about the old couple who came in every Sunday, sharing the same slice of apple pie for 30 years. About the street musician who played saxophone outside during summer evenings, offering music in exchange for hot coffee. About her own reflection in the diner's windows late at night, wondering if she'd ever be more than just another waitress with a dream. The song ended just as she finished wiping down the last table. Looking around the empty diner, she felt a familiar mix of exhaustion and hope. Tomorrow would bring another day of orders to take, coffee to pour, and customers to serve. But for now, in this quiet moment, she was more than just a waitress. She was a songwriter, a storyteller, an artist waiting for her moment to shine. Little did she know, her moment was coming sooner than she thought. Sometimes the biggest breaks happen when you least expect them, in the most ordinary places, even in a downtown diner on a rainy night. The storm that hit the city that evening was unexpected. Lightning crackled across the sky, sending most people running for shelter. The diner's neon sign flickered against the darkened streets, its warm glow a beacon in the downpour. It was almost closing time, but the bell of the door chimed as one last customer hurried in, shaking raindrops from his coat. The waitress looked up from where she was restocking sugar packets, noting his expensive leather briefcase and the way he carried himself. Someone clearly not from the regular crowd. His salt and pepper hair was damp from the rain, and despite his clearly expensive clothes, there was something approachable about his tired eyes and kind smile. "Just a coffee, please," he said, settling into a booth by the window. and maybe somewhere to wait out this storm. She noticed his fingers drumming on the table, not impatiently, but rhythmically, like a musician keeping time. The diner was empty except for this mysterious stranger, and as she brewed a fresh pot of coffee, she found herself wondering about his story. He had the look of someone who'd seen both sides of success, the struggle and the triumph. She'd served enough customers over the years to recognize that particular blend of wisdom and weariness. Thunder rolled outside as she brought him his coffee. He thanked her with genuine warmth, different from the rushed politeness she usually received. The old radio behind the counter crackled with static before picking up a classic soul tune, and she couldn't help but hum along as she started her closing routine. The stranger sat quietly, watching the rain and occasionally making notes in a small leather notebook. He seemed content to stay until the storm passed, and her manager, seeing the weather, had simply nodded and told her to take her time closing up. As she moved through her end-of-day tasks, the familiar comfort of the empty diner wrapped around her like a warm blanket. Without thinking, she began to sing softly, the song she'd been working on for weeks. It was about chasing dreams while watching other people live theirs, about finding magic in mundane moments, about hope that refuses to die even when reality tries to crush it. Her voice grew stronger with each verse, forgetting for a moment that she wasn't alone. The words flowed naturally, telling the story of late-night shifts and early morning dreams, of serving coffee while hoping for something more. The clink of plates and the storm's rhythm became her backing track. The stranger sat motionless, his coffee forgotten. His eyes were closed, but she could see him nodding slightly to the rhythm of her song. When she finished, the silence felt heavy with possibility. "That's quite a gift you have there," he said quietly, opening his eyes. She froze, embarrassed at being caught in her private performance. But his expression wasn't mocking or dismissive. Instead, there was a spark of genuine interest. "Oh, it's just something I do while cleaning," she said, feeling her cheeks warm. "Helps pass the time." He smiled, reaching into his briefcase. "I've spent 30 years in the music industry," he said, pulling out a business card. "And I've learned that the most authentic talent often shows up in the most unexpected places." The card was simple but elegant, bearing the logo of one of the city's most prestigious recording studios. Her hand trembled slightly as she took the card. "I hear hundreds of trained singers every year," he continued, "but rarely do I hear someone sing with such genuine emotion. That song, did you write it?" She nodded, suddenly conscious of her coffee-stained apron and sensible shoes. "I just write what I know," she said softly. "About real life, real people." "That's exactly what makes it special," he replied, standing up as the storm began to ease. "The industry has enough manufactured stars. What it needs is authenticity. Someone who can tell stories that real people relate to." He left enough money on the table to cover 10 cups of coffee. "Think about it. The studio card has my direct number. Call when you're ready to share your gift with more than just the night shift." Long after he'd gone, she stood holding the card, her reflection in the rain-streaked windows showing a waitress on the edge of something life-changing. Sometimes dreams don't arrive with fanfare and fireworks. Sometimes they slip in quietly with the rain, ordering a cup of coffee and changing everything. The business card sat on her tiny apartment table for 3 weeks, its edges now slightly worn from how often she'd picked it up and put it down again. Real life had a way of drowning out dreams, and right now, reality was screaming louder than ever. Her younger sister's college tuition bill lay next to the card, the numbers seeming to grow larger every time she looked at them. 6 years of working at the diner had taught her how to stretch a dollar, but this was different. This was her sister's future, and she'd promised their mom she'd help make it happen. The morning shift had been particularly busy. A tour bus had broken down nearby, flooding the diner with hungry travelers. As she rushed between tables, balancing plates and refilling coffee cups, her manager had pulled her aside. The assistant manager position was opening up. More money, better hours, health insurance. everything she should want. "You're my best waitress," her manager had said, the fluorescent lights highlighting the genuine concern on her face. "You've earned this. But you'll need to be available for evening shifts. No more rushing off to those music classes at the community center." Now, sitting on her worn couch after her shift, she held her old guitar, a thrift store find from her first month in the city. Her fingers found the familiar chords of her newest song, one about feeling stuck between what you should do and what your heart screams to do. The melody came easily, but the words kept getting caught in her throat. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "Got an A on my midterm. Couldn't have done it without you." The message came with a photo of her sister's beaming face, pride and hope radiating from the screen. 6 years ago, she'd left their small town with 2 promises: to make something of herself, and to make sure her sister got the chances she deserved. The community center's weekly music class had become her sanctuary. Every Wednesday evening, she'd rush from her shift, still smelling of coffee and French fries, to spend 2 precious hours learning proper breathing techniques and music theory. Her teacher, an elderly woman with endless patience, had been helping her develop her natural talent into something more polished. "Raw talent is a gift," her teacher always said, "but it's what you do with it that matters." The business card caught the late afternoon light, the studio's name seeming to glow. That rainy night still felt like a dream. Had a real music producer actually heard something special in her voice? The thought made her stomach flutter with equal parts excitement and fear. Her tiny apartment told the story of 6 years of careful living. Photos of her family lined the walls, mixed with playbills from local shows she dreamed of performing in. Her tip jar money had slowly transformed into a keyboard, then recording equipment from second-hand stores. Every spare moment between shifts had been spent teaching herself to play, to write, to create. The assistant manager position would mean an end to struggling with rent. It would mean being able to help her sister without counting every penny. It would mean security, that precious thing her mother had always stressed the importance of. But it would also mean giving up her music classes, giving up the dream she'd been nurturing through countless late-night practice sessions, through embarrassing first performances at coffee shops, through every moment when she'd chosen to believe in herself despite all evidence suggesting she shouldn't. She picked up her phone and pulled up the photo her coworker had taken last week, her singing while serving coffee to the elderly couple who came in every morning. The joy on their faces, the natural way the song had flowed while she worked, the feeling that maybe, just maybe, she could have both worlds. The evening sun cast long shadows across her apartment floor as she sat there, the weight of the decision pressing on her chest. Sometimes life's biggest moments don't announce themselves with fanfare. Sometimes they come disguised as simple choices: left or right, safety or risk, should or must. She looked at her sister's text again, then at the business card. Perhaps the real question wasn't about choosing between responsibility and dreams. Perhaps it was about finding the courage to believe she deserved both. The morning rush was in full swing when the bell above the diner door chimed. She was in the middle of pouring coffee for the usual crowd of construction workers when she glanced up and nearly dropped the pot. The music producer from that rainy night was back, looking just as out of place in his tailored suit as he had before. This time, he wasn't alone. A younger woman accompanied him, her sophisticated appearance softened by kind eyes and a gentle smile. They settled into the same booth by the window, and her heart started racing. She'd kept his card, but hadn't called, torn between her dreams and responsibilities. Now here he was, returning to her everyday world. "Your regular order?" she asked the elderly couple at table 6, her voice shakier than usual. They'd been coming to the diner for breakfast every day for the past 20 years. The wife reached out and patted her hand, noticing her nervousness. "You look like you've seen a ghost, dear," the old woman said softly. "Is everything all right?" Before she could answer, her coworker gently nudged her toward the window booth. "I'll cover your tables," she whispered. "Go talk to them." The producer stood as she approached their table. I hope you don't mind us dropping by, he said. I couldn't stop thinking about your song. This is my colleague from the studio. She handles artist development. The woman smiled warmly. We've been looking for authentic voices, people with real stories to tell. Your song about chasing dreams while living paycheck to paycheck. That's something millions of people can relate to. Her hands twisted her apron nervously. I haven't called because... She started, but was interrupted by a commotion at the counter. Tell them about the night you sang for my grandson's birthday. Called out one of her regular customers, a retired teacher who always ordered wheat toast and scrambled eggs. Remember how you made that little boy's day special? Suddenly, it seemed like every regular customer had a story to share. The construction workers talked about how she'd sing while refilling their coffee, making their early mornings brighter. The elderly couple mentioned how she'd written a special anniversary song for them last month. Even the quiet businessman who always sat in the corner looked up from his newspaper to nod in agreement. Her manager emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She's been lighting up this place for 6 years, she said proudly. We've all been waiting for someone to notice what we see every day. The producer's colleague was scribbling notes rapidly. This is exactly what we're looking for. Someone who connects with people, who brings music into everyday life. But my shifts, she started, thinking about her responsibilities. My sister's tuition. We'll cover for you, her coworker interrupted. We've been talking about it since that rainy night. All of us will split your shifts. The elderly couple stood up slowly. We've watched you grow from a shy girl into a wonderful young woman, the wife said. You've shared your gift with us every day. It's time to share it with the world. The producer pulled out a folder. We're offering you a chance to record a demo at our studio. 3 songs to start. We'll work around your schedule. Evenings, weekends, whatever you need. This isn't about changing who you are. It's about giving your voice a bigger platform. She looked around the diner, at the familiar faces that had become family, at the walls that had witnessed countless songs, at the coffee-stained counter where she'd scribbled lyrics between orders. Every person in the room was smiling, encouraging, believing in her. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, catching the steam rising from coffee cups and creating a kind of everyday magic. Sometimes support comes not in grand gestures, but in small moments of community, in people coming together to lift someone up. Her voice was steady when she finally spoke. When do we start? The diner erupted in cheers, coffee cups raising in impromptu toasts. The construction workers whistled, the elderly couple hugged, and her manager quickly wiped away a tear. In that moment, the line between dreams and reality blurred, and possibility filled the air like the sweet smell of fresh-baked pies. The recording studio felt like another world compared to the familiar comfort of the diner. Instead of the smell of coffee and pancakes, there was the faint scent of new carpet and air conditioning. Instead of the clinking of plates and murmur of conversations, there was the intimidating silence of soundproofed walls. Let's try that verse again, the vocal coach said through the headphones. It was her 5th attempt at the same lines, and frustration was building in her chest. The song that had flowed so naturally while serving coffee now felt stiff and formal under the studio lights. Her morning shift had been particularly busy, and her voice felt tired. The coffee stain on her sleeve reminded her of the life she was trying to balance. Early morning rushes at the diner, afternoon vocal training, evening recording sessions. Sleep had become a luxury she barely remembered. Your pitch is wavering on the high notes, the coach explained kindly. Remember your breathing exercises. But the breathing techniques felt foreign compared to the natural way she'd always sung. In the diner, she'd never worried about proper diaphragm support or vocal placement. She'd just let her heart lead her voice. During a break, she sat on the studio's back steps, calling her sister. Maybe I'm not cut out for this, she admitted, watching the sunset paint the city skyline. Everything I do seems wrong. They want me to change how I sing, how I write, even how I stand. Remember when you taught me to ride a bike? Her sister asked. How many times did I fall before I got it right? But you never let me give up." The memory brought a smile to her face. Those long summer evenings, running alongside her sister's wobbly bicycle, believing in her until she believed in herself. Back in the studio, the producer noticed her struggling. "Tell me about the couple who inspired this song," he said, referring to the elderly diner regulars she'd written about. As she spoke about their 50-year love story, their daily visits, the way they still looked at each other over their shared slice of pie, her voice softened with genuine emotion. "That's it," he said suddenly. "Sing it like you're telling their story across the counter. Forget about the microphone. Forget about the technique. Just tell the story." They dimmed the bright studio lights, and she closed her eyes, imagining the familiar faces from the diner. She thought about the construction worker who'd lost his wife last year, how she'd sung Amazing Grace softly while refilling his coffee cup every morning for a month. She remembered the young college student who'd celebrated getting into medical school at the diner, and how they all joined in an impromptu chorus of celebration. This time, when she sang, her voice carried all those stories. It wasn't perfect by technical standards. There were little breaks and raw edges, but it was real. The producer's eyes lit up behind the glass. "That's what we've been looking for," he said. "That honesty." The vocal coach began working with her differently after that, helping her refine her natural style rather than trying to reshape it entirely. They found a balance between technical skill and authentic expression. Some days were still hard, trying to hit difficult notes while running on 4 hours of sleep or rewriting lyrics between serving customers. But slowly, something began to change. The breathing exercises became second nature, like the rhythm of moving between diner tables. The studio began to feel less foreign, though she still preferred singing in the diner's familiar warmth. Her coworkers noticed the difference too. How she stood taller, how her voice carried more confidence even while just singing along to the kitchen radio. One evening, after a particularly long recording session, she played back one of her songs. It was a simple tune about finding extraordinary moments in ordinary days. The production was polished now, but underneath all the technical improvements, she could still hear the heart of the waitress who sang while serving coffee. That's when she realized she hadn't lost herself in this journey. She just found a way to share her true self with a larger audience. As she locked up the diner that night, she caught herself humming the new version of her song. The melody bounced off the quiet streets, mixing with the city sounds. A perfect harmony of where she came from and where she was going. It started as just another ordinary Tuesday morning at the diner. The regulars were in their usual spots: construction workers at the counter, elderly couples in their favorite booths, and the morning rush of office workers grabbing coffee to go. The waitress moved between tables with practiced ease, pouring coffee and taking orders while humming softly to herself. A young college student sat in the corner, typing away on her laptop. She'd become a regular over the past few weeks, always ordering the cheapest coffee and making it last for hours. The waitress had noticed her struggling to stay awake some mornings and would occasionally slip her a fresh cup on the house, remembering her own sister's late-night study sessions. That morning, the elderly couple who'd been coming to the diner for decades was celebrating their 51st wedding anniversary. Without any fanfare, the waitress began singing their favorite song while serving their usual breakfast order. Her voice carried the warmth of genuine affection as she wove between tables, never missing a beat in her duties. The college student, touched by the scene, quietly pulled out her phone and started recording. The video captured something magical: the natural way the waitress transitioned between taking orders and singing, the loving looks exchanged by the elderly couple, the smiles spreading across other customers' faces. It wasn't a polished performance, it was real life set to music. "You should post that," one of the construction workers suggested, noticing the student filming. "People need to see there's still magic in everyday moments." The student hesitated, looking at the waitress. "Would that be okay? It's beautiful how you make everyone feel special while doing your job." The waitress smiled, thinking about her recent studio sessions and how different this was. No pressure, no perfect takes, just genuine connection through music. Sure, she said, not thinking much of it. After all, who would be interested in a singing waitress? The answer came faster than anyone expected. By evening, the video had already gathered thousands of views. People were sharing it with comments like, "This is what real talent looks like," and finally, something authentic in a world of filters and fakery. The next morning, more customers filled the diner than usual, many holding up their phones hopefully. But they didn't find a performer putting on a show. They found a hardworking waitress who simply loved music and people in equal measure. She sang when the moment felt right, told stories through her songs, and treated every customer like family. Comments flooded in from around the world. "She reminds me of my mom, who worked 2 jobs but never lost her smile. This is what pursuing your dreams while keeping it real looks like. Notice how she never stops working while singing. That's dedication." A popular streaming platform's music division reached out through the college students' video comments. They weren't looking for another manufactured star. They wanted someone who could tell real stories about real life, someone who understood the beauty in ordinary moments. The producer from the recording studio called, excitement in his voice. "This is exactly what we've been working toward," he said. "People connect with authenticity. They're tired of perfect. They want real." The viral fame brought unexpected moments of beauty. A group of waitresses from across the country started sharing their own musical moments at work, inspired by her example. The elderly couple from the video received messages from people worldwide, thanking them for showing what lifelong love looks like. The diner became a symbol of something larger, a place where dreams didn't have to wear fancy clothes or follow traditional paths. Customers began sharing their own stories, their own dreams, creating an atmosphere of hope and possibility that went far beyond viral fame. Through it all, she kept serving coffee, kept singing, kept being herself. The video's success hadn't changed her. It had simply shown the world what her regular customers had known all along. That sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most ordinary places, and that dreams don't have to wait for perfect moments to come true. The diner looked different now, though nothing had really changed. The same neon sign still buzzed outside, the same coffee maker still hummed in the corner, and the same regulars still occupied their favorite spots. But something in the air had shifted, like the first warm breeze after a long winter. Her debut album, Midnight at the Diner, had just been released. The cover photo showed her in her waitress uniform, sitting at the counter where she'd spent so many years serving coffee and dreams in equal measure. The songs told real stories, about the construction worker who rebuilt his life after loss, about the college student who finally graduated, about the elderly couple whose love story had inspired thousands. Today was special. Her sister was graduating college, and a celebration was happening right here in the diner. The tables were pushed together, creating one long family-style setting. Her sister's diploma lay proudly on the counter, next to a plate of the diner's famous apple pie. "Remember when you used to send me your tips to help with my textbooks?" her sister asked, eyes shining. "Now look at us." The diner erupted in cheers as they hugged, years of shared sacrifice finally bearing fruit. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. The producer stood up, tapping his coffee cup with a spoon. "We have an announcement," he said, smiling. "The diner is going to become something more. Every weekend, we're opening the space to aspiring musicians who, like you, are balancing their dreams with their day jobs." The plan was beautiful in its simplicity. The diner would remain exactly what it had always been during regular hours, a place for good food, warm coffee, and friendly faces. But on weekend evenings, it would transform into a performance venue for working people who had songs in their hearts. "We're calling it the Midnight Stage," her manager announced proudly, "because dreams don't stop when the day shift ends." She looked around at the faces that had become family. The cook who had always turned down the kitchen radio to hear her sing. The regulars who had requested songs while she refilled their coffee. The coworkers who had covered her shifts so she could record. Each one had played a part in her journey. Now she found herself in a position to help others like her. A young delivery driver who sang between routes. A teacher who wrote songs about her students' stories. A bus driver with a voice that could fill stadiums. The diner would give them all a stage, just as it had given her a chance. Her album was climbing the charts, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. People connected with songs about grinding through long shifts while holding on to hope, about finding beauty in routine, about communities coming together to lift each other up. She still worked shifts at the diner, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Success doesn't mean leaving your roots, she'd tell the aspiring musicians who now sought her advice. It means growing strong enough to lift others up with you. The elderly couple who had been part of her viral video moment now had their own special table, marked with a small plaque. They'd become local celebrities in their own right, their enduring love story interwoven with the diner's new chapter. On this particular evening, as the sun set and the dinner crowd thinned, she picked up the coffee pot one more time. As she moved between tables, she began to sing, not one of her album tracks, but a new song at this very moment. About how dreams come true in unexpected ways, about how success tastes sweetest when shared, about how some places become magical, not because they change, but because they help us change while keeping us grounded. The diner had become more than just a restaurant or a music venue. It was a reminder that extraordinary dreams could grow from ordinary places, that humble beginnings could birth beautiful endings, and that sometimes the best spotlights aren't the ones that shine the brightest, but the ones that light the way for others to follow. As her voice filled the familiar space, blending with the clink of coffee cups and the whispered conversations of dreamers planning their own journeys, she realized that this wasn't really an ending at all. It was just the beginning of a different kind of song, one that would echo far beyond these walls, carrying the message that every life has its own melody, just waiting for the right moment to be heard.